What's good, family? So mash the like button, subscribe and lick off the bell. So, picking up from yesterday, what do we know? Your man's Chris Eubank Jr. has hopped back on the old nag, Billy Joe Saunders, yeah? I spoke to Chris earlier and he said, listen YB, truth is, I'm not done with Billy Joe Saunders yet, yeah? I'm hopping straight back on to give him another riding in, because his legs weren't, listen, end of the day, Chris Eubank has admitted he's wrong. There is a little bit more juice left in the old nag's legs yet, yeah? Billy Joe Saunders isn't all the way done yet. The old nag has got a few more miles in her, thankfully, so we all need to give thanks that Billy Joe Saunders' legs haven't given out all the way right yet. Anyway, let's get to it. So, like I said, I spoke to Chris yesterday, and he said, listen YB, I'm going to go all the way in on your man's Billy Joe. Why? Because Billy ain't going to do nothing. That's what he's not going to do. All he's ever going to do is talk. And that's why he priced himself out. Anyway, let's get to it then. So the first comments made by Chris Eubank were the following. He responded, as we know, Billy Joe came back and said, oh, $5 million. I want it all. The whole lot of it. That's what he said, 100%. You heard the audio recording there. Billy Joe basically saying, oh, I want $10 million and I want this, I want a partridge and a pear tree, all this kind of business. Anyway, so Chris Eubank has responded and said the following. Billy Joe is demanding $5 million. He's not in a position to demand anything. Quitting versus Canelo after saying he'd die before taking a knee. He'll get what he's given. I'm the A side. Once he understands that, we can talk. So, I'm actually glad it's in back and forth. Often, people are allowed to they're let off the hook. Oh, he's priced, for example, how many times have we seen in boxing someone prices himself out and then people let it go almost? In a way, I guess I've even criticised AJ of doing this, in my opinion. When people have made crazy demands, they say things like, oh, we're not going to go back and forth, or I'm not going to call him out of his name and all this kind of stuff. Well, you have to. Because in my opinion, or from what I've observed, sometimes the best way to get fights is to be disrespectful. Unfortunately, because we're not back in the early days where people was taking fights to get belts. Now there's so many belts and there's so many excuses, there's so much money sloshing around, people can avoid the biggest fights. Ultimately they can avoid the fights anyway, but what I'm saying is, when someone's on you, like Chris Eubank is being right now with Billy Joe, it's a lot harder to avoid. And I've got another video coming soon later today, but essentially, there is a bit of, what's the word? It's going back and forth now. So it's going to be difficult for Billy Joe to weasel his way out of this one. Anyway, let me address what Chris actually says here. He's not in a position to demand anything. After he quit versus Canelo, he'll get what he's given. I'm the A side. Once he understands that, then we can talk. Now, whilst I don't like Billy Joe, whilst he definitely quit versus Alvarez, I know that obviously publicly speaking, people talk rubbish anyway, but I'm hoping behind closed doors, this isn't the attitude Chris is taking. I think, honestly, at this point, this should be a 50-50 fight, honestly speaking. Because Chris, equally, we can all sit here and rinse Billy Joe, which is, I'm game for that, but what have you done? Let's call a spade here. Yeah? Yes, Billy jacked versus Alvarez, but he went in there with him. Now, I'm not even going to give Billy Joe credit for going in there, because I'd go in there for 8 million. Give me 8 million. In fact, give me 500 grand. I'll get in there. So, anyone who fights Alvarez, you don't get credit for just fighting him. But that said, we don't know, just like Billy Joe found out. When Billy Joe was rinsing Daniel Dubois, that was before Billy Joe was put in that situation. So it's all well and good Chris rinsing Billy, but we don't know how he's going to react when he's in there with someone who's seriously dangerous. And Chris's career so far, I'm pretty sure, wasn't he linked with Alvarez or Golovkin? And for a long time, Chris has found his excuses not to take the fight, saying stupid things like, oh, I'm the A side, and oh, it's weird stuff. And what we do know is facts. To be fair to Chris, he is a relatively big name, so he shouldn't be having these kind of problems making half-sharp fights. Which tells me, again, if you look at Chris's resume, what's he been doing all this time? He got beat by George Groves, and we saw what people thought about that. Prince Nassim was saying he should retire and quit. It was shocking. And he didn't, to be fair, he didn't have no skill in that fight. But then again, he's never had no skill. Which is, when we circle back, the facts are, no skill or not, he more or less had the beating of Billy Ho in their first fight. And that's what makes this fight relevant in my opinion. But what we need to do right now is everyone put their egos to one side. Yes, have the banter going. Yes, Chris should be saying publicly, listen Billy, you're a bottom. Yeah, you're a sub. And subs don't make no demands. So yeah, publicly I've mentioned it, or I said already. Publicly, I'm 10 out of 10 on board with what Chris is saying. But I'm just hoping behind the scenes he makes a different approach. Same with Billy, to be fair, but I don't trust Billy. I trust Chris more than I trust Billy. I believe Billy genuinely wants £5 million to even start talking. Whereas Chris, who knows, to be fair. I'd like to think he doesn't really think he's the A side, or he's happy to work with 50-50. For me, it should be 50-50, 100%. And bearing in mind they've fought once, yeah, 50-50, they could have a rematch. This could be a 2-fight deal. I don't see why not. Put it this way. Neither of them two have got anything else better going on. Let's call a spade here. In that division, you've got Alvarez and you've got old ass Golovkin. Neither of them want anything to do with them two. Like they say, even Golovkin, as old as he is. So, what else they can be doing? It's a bit like, or it's almost as bad as Amir Khan and Kell Brook. I'm shocked that we're actually still talking about making this fight. This should have been done months ago, if not decades ago. And it's almost the same with this fight. Both Billy Ho and Chris Eubank have nowhere to go. Especially Billy, really. Well, even Chris, because Chris, what's he doing? I wouldn't even mind, yeah, if Chris was campaigning for Alvarez, or campaigning for something, I'd get it, but he's not, he's just hanging around, really. Being tactical. I think after he got that good whooping off of George Groves, he's realised, you know what, it's not really, I wasn't really feeling that. And he's just been hanging around ever since. So what he needs to do is, seriously, approach Billy Ho and say, Billy, I don't know about 5 million, but what we can offer you is a 50-50 split. And then we'll do a 2-fight deal, 50-50 split. Because think about it, these men involved, whatever we say about these men, yeah, they can sell a fight. And the back and forth will be top class. It's a fact. And we actually know, look at Alvarez's numbers. Alvarez's numbers, yeah, versus Billy Ho were some of the biggest I think he's done in recent years. Maybe even the biggest, to be honest. Apart from Golovkin, the Billy Ho fight was more or less the biggest. And that was with Alvarez, who don't say much. Chris Eubank, we know for, I mean, in fact, look at the first fight. Billy Ho and Chris Eubank, as far as UK goes, it's as entertaining as it gets. And imagine having this build up over a year. If that makes sense. 2-fight deal. It'd be the best thing them two can do. So I hope Chris approaches him and says, listen Billy, you get 50%, and then in the rematch, the winner gets 75 or whatever. However you need to make it. But this next fight, given that Billy's been turned out and quit, people could argue, because before the fight, before the Alvarez fight, people could argue Billy's the A side, he's the world champion, and whatever. But now, he's got no belt, and he's been turned out on international TV. Chris, he hasn't been turned out, but he's never been world champion. So it works out 50-50 for me. And given where they both are in their careers right now, Chris, you ain't beat no one. So you ain't, for you to sit there and argue about demanding more than 50% and being a bona fide A side, you're lying to yourself. Equally, Billy, you got no belt. Because the thing that Billy would always say is, oh, I got one belt. You ain't got no belt. Well, you ain't got no belt now. And you've been turned out and you quit. So this for me is a 50-50 fight. In terms of split. And the winner of this fight will have a future, if that makes sense. This is the who has a future fight. Who has a future in boxing? The winner of this series goes on. The other dude needs to retire. That's the bottom line for me. Absolute bottom line here. But that's what makes it interesting, in my opinion. That's what makes this fight interesting. Because what we know is, it's not going to be for a belt. That's not, oh well, whoever wins this is the world champion or the best in the world. It's not one of them fights. This is, whoever wins this fight, need to retire. Sorry, whoever loses this fight is 100% a retiree. Yeah, 100%. And the mouthy part of it makes it interesting. And it will be a travesty if this fight don't happen. And I'm sorry, yeah, I've got to say it. Whoever's managing these two, if this fight don't happen, and these two men, fair enough, yeah, if Billy Ho retires, then it makes sense. But if Billy Ho and Eubank, yeah, go on to fight other people and not this fight, shocking management, shocking IQ. Because there's nowhere else they're going to get this type of money for this type of fight. Nowhere. This is almost not far off Alvarez money, if that makes sense. Because of the size of it in the UK. And the talking they'll be doing. And I've explained to you, man, before that UK, or boxing in general, is really boring these days. But this is one fight I'd tune into. And I can't say that for many fights. Outside of AJ fights, what fights can you sit there and say, I'm tuning into that? Guess what? Dillian Whyte fights, I'm not saying that. For a while, well, even then, to be honest with you. Truth be known, Dillian Whyte versus Joseph Parker, or Chris Eubank versus Billy Ho. I'm going with the Chris Eubank one, I'm sorry. Because it means more. Dillian Whyte fighting AJ's leftovers, it's a bit plain, I don't know. I've never really been into that myself. But look at the numbers that did either way. So, let's see how it plays out. But what we know is, historically, these two have never been able to make a deal. We know Chris Eubank hard to deal with. And the whole bad blood between these two. And that's what frustrates me the most about this sport, yeah. In boxing, you'd think, in my mind, if I've got an enemy, yeah, if I've got someone I really hate, it should be easy to make, shouldn't it? You should say, you know what, I'd fight you for free. And that's what a lot of these dudes say, oh, I'd fight him for free on the street. Well, if you fight him for free on the street, why don't you do it for $3 million? But instead, it's a bit like Amir Khan and Kell Brook. Although, tell a lie, that's not true. Because Kell Brook ain't scared of Amir Khan. It's Amir Khan. Amir Khan's scared of being knocked out. But there's another example. Amir Khan and Kell Brook have... Well, Amir Khan's thrown away $5 million, $10 million in a 2-fight deal. Just because he's scared of being knocked out when he's been knocked out his whole career. It's weird. But to be fair to Amir Khan, he has made other big fights in the US, so he's not down bad for cash. But as far as Eubank and Billy Ho go, they ain't got no options. No options have they got. This fight must happen. Now, the last point I want to talk on, people say things like, well, YB, you're wrong. Billy Ho's the A-side because he's got a win over Eubank. Listen, that fight was a draw, truth be known. That fight was a draw. Why? Look at Billy Ho's resume. Billy Ho was an Olympic bronze medalist. If an Olympic bronze medalist loses the last 5 rounds of a fight, he lost the fight. Or it's a draw, sorry. That's why this fight was a draw. Billy Ho never should have been going. When we saw how bad he was at boxing against George Groves, and Billy Ho thinks he's the best boxer in the world ever, the fact that Chris Eubank rolled half the legs off of Billy Ho in them last 5 rounds, that fight was a draw. So no, Billy Ho don't have a win. And to be honest, I remember watching in the post-fight interview, Billy Ho was even saying, oh well, you know, if he wants a rematch, I'll give it to him. Oh, Billy Ho was pretty humble, and you could tell he felt a bit. He knew it wasn't a blatant win. He was saying, yeah, if he wants to rematch, I'll give it to him, and I'm rah rah rah. So he knows it was close. And that makes it, and it's the thing, that makes it even more watchable in the rematch. It wasn't, people get it twisted. People listen to what Billy Ho says. Most people, you know, haven't even watched the fight. Most people, after all these years, have just listened to what Billy Ho said. Oh, he boxed his ears off. Not really. It was a 50-50 fight. Billy Ho had to dig in deep. because he had no cardio. And Billy Ho's renowned to have no cardio. And guess what? No matter what you say about Chris Eubank, he got cardio. So again, there's another little... That's another little point that makes this fight watchable. Eubank has the cardio king, and you got a dude who has no cardio. There's loads of little stories that go on here. Who is he going to have to retire? You got the retirement story. You got the cardio story. You got the quit story. You got even the money story. There's loads of narratives in this that make it a big event, and it'll be. But you know what? It's 2021, and what I've learned about boxing in the last few years is, guess what? We don't get the fights we want, and we barely even get the fights we don't want. So this for me would be a fight I want. So we know we ain't getting that. Yeah, because what we know is, look at Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. That's a fight we didn't want. In fact, that's a great example. Look, we didn't get Tyson Fury and AJ. That's the fight we wanted. And we didn't get the fight we didn't want in Fury versus Wilder. So that's the state of boxing now. If I want Eubank and Billy Joe Saunders to fight, and it makes sense. If you want Kell Brook and Amir Khan to fight, you ain't getting it. You'll be lucky to get the bummy... In fact, they're not even lucky. They're the fights we get. At the moment, we get the fights that are complete bummy fights. The bummiest of them all. And then once in a blue moon, we get a fight like Alvarez versus Billy Joe. Once in a blue moon. That's it. This summer, or in this year, you know, that's been the only fight we actually got. When we were supposed to have loads. We were supposed to have Wilder versus Fury. We were supposed to have Pacquiao versus Spence. You see what I mean? All these ones just drop off. We were supposed to have Amir Khan and Kell Brook.